Dragon Ball The Breakers is the most frustrating game I have ever enjoyed. Because on one hand, it's a clever take on Dragon Ball as an IP by turning it into an asymmetrical survival game, in the vein of Dead by Daylight. All the while, the Dragon Ball IP and all of the quote-unquote mechanics you'd associate with it does allow them to establish an identity far from its inspiration. But on the other hand, there's a reason why everyone with 300 plus hours in Breakers advises you to not bother. From questionable balance choices to a player base of mostly optimal tryhards, to the gacha system, to no shortage of toxic mindsets, Breakers can just be tiring to play in 2025. But I also feel most of the criticism of the game is very short-sighted and blanket negativity. More often than not, it only really encompasses the current meta and the actions or mindsets of the remaining player base, even when it comes to the more dedicated streamers of the game. In fact, if you went online to look, you'd be forgiven for thinking the only thing that the game needs to be saved is for raiders to win more consistently, and for anyone who uses Energy Field to be permabanned while losing social credit score. I, however, am not satisfied with such an approach. So I'll be taking it upon myself to explain why Dragon Ball Breakers, at its core, is just not a good game to play these days, and why it will never truly be saved thanks to its long-standing problems, all of which appear to be out of the developer's control, no less. Balance is the most consistent complaint in Dragon Ball The Breakers. Regardless of the season, the ever-changing meta has always defined the gameplay if you did not have a full pre-made. More on that in a few. But let's put aside any individual tactics from any individual season. Breakers, by its very nature, will always struggle to balance anything actually being useful. As an example, let's look at a particularly infamous survivor skill. With Energy Field, the player gets access to a shield that blocks most raider attacks, save for certain blowout and power attacks. From the raider's POV, this move is very unfair, especially if they're playing as a character that doesn't currently have any options to bypass it. The survivor can just push them around or escape consequence-free, and the raider is just told to get over it, even if they were playing properly. The thing is, from the survivor's POV, this 10-second interaction that the raider is complaining about is for the survivors the natural state of the game, with EF being one of the few game changers a solo survivor has. That's where the trick of trying to balance this mess of a genre comes in. It's not just the one versus all perspective. You're not just having to look at it in the case of the raider versus the survivor team, but also the experience of individual survivors. In other words, it's not a binary system, but a trinary one. It's supposed to be that the raider goes after individual survivors, but the survivor team can overpower the raider, even with only 3 or 4 people, let alone all 7. This results in the idea that if a skill move is good for the team, it's rather weak on its own, and vice versa. However, in practice, it means that for raiders, a game-changing solo skill screws them over in any short-term encounter, while anything that benefits the survivor team might not be felt by the raider until it's too late to do anything about it. But on the flip side, there are plenty of times where the solo survivor experience is ignored, because if they make something too good, then just 3 or 4 people running that skill can overpower the raider way too quickly. On that note though, while Android 17's slot machine drop got the most salt over the game's lifespan, I would say it's passive skills that have been hurt the most by the 3-prong approach of balance this genre has. Some of the weaker perks feel like stuff that should be on your survivor by default, like slowly generating Dragon Charge if you stay at level 0 for too long, or eventually regenerating your shield if you go long enough without getting a second hit. But again, the game has to factor in that you're just one of 7 survivors on the team. This results in a lot of passives either being divided into several skills, like the running speed upgrades, or they're just functionally dead slots outside of very specific circumstances. Emergency Time Patrol and SOS come to mind. In other words, passive skills tend to feel very weak on individual survivors because you only get 4 slots and you're only 1/7 of the experience. But the raider technically has to deal with 24 passives being active at any given time, and passives can stack on each other in some cases, so they have to be weak. This is the struggle for balancing any asymmetrical game. How do you make it so individual characters feel capable without them overpowering the killer? Well, there's no easy answer to that. If you give the survivors more passive slots, then the perks need to be weakened, making the aforementioned problems even worse. If you let the player get additional passives that unlock as their teammates die off, which has been my solution of choice personally, you then introduce a new problem of players refusing to save teammates they otherwise could or would have, just so they can get themselves to a stronger state. And if you make it so that pre-mates have passive skills nerfed, which is something a buddy of mine would like, you effectively punish people for playing with friends. And all of this is on top of the intended balance of survivors having to choose between helping themselves and their teammates, while still making sure everything is reasonable for a raider to go up against. Then again, it's not like the raiders are painfully weak. Oh sure, there's been several points in the meta where the survivors as a team have had the advantage, but individual survivors are basically toast if the raider finds them too quickly. While there's always going to be rotten luck with something like that in this kind of game, many DLC raiders, namely Vegeta, Broly, and Baby, actively encourage hunting down survivors when they're at a low level and before they have a chance to fight back. Sure, it makes sense from the perspective of the raider versus the survivor team, but you don't control all 7 survivors. You're 1/7 of the experience who has to fend for yourself, while being dropped in a game where you literally can't do that until you find enough stuff. All of this is to say, there is an assload of factors you have to consider when adding anything into this game. And it makes achieving an ideal balance almost impossible. But all of this was forgivable. The balance of the gameplay, from the seasonal meta to the core problems with the genre and structure, was always something the player base would put up with when you could play with friends. Then, it happened. While Breakers has always had its problems with balance, the community is what held up the game. Even with there being no shortage of tryhards or players wanting to police what abilities you could use, Breakers had a comparatively casual audience for the first 4 seasons. On top of your newbies, experts, and intermediate players, you'd find raiders who just wanted to mess around, or raiders who would give the last survivor all 7 Dragon Balls for a one-on-one fight. Overall, Breakers was a fairly dynamic experience for a while. Was being the keyword. Season 5 introduced Region Lock, making it so that the game all but refuses to connect you with anyone outside of your country. This would eventually be made even more obnoxious and became impossible to connect with anyone in a different time zone. So people in West Virginia would not be able to lobby up with people from Kansas. Players in France were too far away for the game to lobby them up with people from Germany. Trying at all these days to play with anyone outside your designated friend zone will constantly stall queues to upwards of a freaking hour, and then break what few lobbies you get. Now, the exact motivation for all this region lock nonsense has been a debate in and of itself. Some think it's because everything about the game is designed exclusively with the Japanese player base in mind, while others think it's an effort to nerf pre-mates from ruining the experience, especially once ranked came into the picture. Some people just think it's a lazy way to try to reduce lag without having to actually change it from peer-to-peer to designated servers. This way, they only need to spend money to make sure that their precious item shop isn't hacked. Well, regardless of the why, the result is the same. Breakers is now a multiplayer game that punishes you for playing with friends. That change in direction will be remembered as the death of the game. It has effectively destroyed the intermediate audience for Breakers, with the remaining players being either newbies who got the game for cheap, or longtime players so heavily invested that not even they know why they're still playing. And the thing is, once someone from either of those audiences stops playing Breakers, it's hard to get them to come back. New players will have no reason to come back to something as mediocre as Breakers, given how oversaturated the gaming landscape is. And the veterans, this is a game they have not been enjoying, but tolerating for the longest time. What makes all of this so frustrating is how easy it could be to fix. Just let the player decide if they want to turn on region lock. Seriously, just call it connection priority, and let the player set it to local, regional, or global. That way, Japanese players, or anyone for that matter, can stick to playing with just them if that's what they truly want, and those willing to deal with lag to play with people around the world can choose to do so. The game is already peer-to-peer, so it's not like there's any server maintenance for implementing such an adjustment. But something tells me this isn't gonna change. Let's go through the typical gameplay loop that Breakers has once you're left to play with strangers. Maybe a friend or two, if you're lucky. First is the queue. This will be, at best, a 4-minute wait currently. Realistically, 7+ minutes. If you have to regularly re-queue, that can go up to 20 minutes. But let's stick with 7 for the sake of argument. Once you get into the game, you'll have 1 to 2 minutes to select your loadout and load into the game. Combine that with early gameplay, and it's safe to say that there's a 10-minute wait minimum between games. Now that you've gotten into the game, you have 2 major concerns. First, you need to get Dragon Change to level 1 as soon as possible so the Raider doesn't get a free kill the moment they spot you. This is especially true against Vegeta and Broly. And in the case of Baby, you just need to hope he doesn't find you at all, as no amount of Dragon Change level will help you, since he can bypass melee combat entirely and instantly kill you on command at level 1. If the team determines you're not worth the effort of saving, you're dead, since the in-cap time hitting 0 means you are removed from the game. And no, the Dragon Balls cannot revive fallen teammates, so there is no reason to stick around beyond any of your own personal interests. The other thing you need to worry about is the team killing the Raider too quickly. Sure, nowadays this can only realistically happen with Cell and Majin Buu, maybe a particularly bad Frieza, but if the Raider is defeated too quickly, like within the first 2 minutes, the game will actually forfeit the match, assuming that the Raider was AFK or poorly matched up in terms of skill, meaning you get nothing for it. No DP medals collected on the map will be saved, no daily or weekly contributions will be counted, and you effectively wasted your time. But let's assume neither of these happen. You get your Dragon Change up high enough, and the Raider lives long enough for the game to count. You now have 5 major goals: continue leveling up Dragon Change, find keys for the time machine, get items, rescue civilians, and find Dragon Balls. And during this moment-to-moment gameplay, you can really feel how sluggish the gameplay is. If you don't have the abilities for movement on each terrain type, and you can only have up to 4, so you never will, you're pretty slow to move around the map. If you don't have the climbing or jumping perks, scaling up walls is a miserably slow process on anything more than a modest hill. Driving can make you move faster, but without the perk of picking up items, the stop and start nature of getting on and off the bike to loot stuff is infuriating. And no matter what perks you have, looting will require you to stop and grab each item individually. So grab and go whenever the Raider nearby isn't really a thing unless another survivor is there to get their attention. Saving civilians, reviving teammates, placing keys, using vending machines, applying nearly any item, all of this has various degrees of delay or waiting. It's understandable why they do from a balance perspective, but for the individual survivors, the game can feel like it's 90% of clunky looting before the clunky combat kicks in. Speaking of combat, it's not very good. Combat in Breakers is like an English dub of an anime from the 1970s. Nothing really lines up with what you see, and everything is way too fast to process what's happening if you're not already on top of things. Hitboxes for Raider attacks are often 3 to 5 times the size of the actual beam. Their lock-on and priority with melee combat makes close-range engagement as much of a gamble as the gacha machine in the hub, and the knockback from Raider melee and super moves will often knock the survivor past their camera, removing their line of sight with the Raider, which often dooms the survivor to follow-up strikes, which is usually enough to knock them out of Dragon Change. Breakers also has a weird way of looking at the survivor team. It wants the team to work together to defeat the Raider, since the Raider is deliberately meant to overpower any single survivor. However, the game also doesn't want survivors to directly cooperate with each other. There's no voice chat, and the pings are very limited in effectiveness. The game even encourages you to be willing to leave teammates to die for your own survival. And then there's the unintended effect with the Dragon Balls. It is always a better idea to give yourself level 4 than to give the entire team level 3. Oh wait, it doesn't actually give you level 3, it just levels them all up at once. If it gave all of them level 3, then maybe that ability would have something to be worth using. However, you do need to think about the team when you need to escape, because if the escape time machine is hit even once by the Raider, it is destroyed and the entire team is wiped from the mistake of a single player. So yeah, Breakers punishes you for trying to form a team, and it punishes you for looking out for yourself. You can't win. Then again, from a gameplay standpoint, it's not like the Raider has it much better. The game encourages the survivor team to gank him in groups, so if the Raider ever loses control of a fight, it can easily result in a large chunk of health being lost as the survivors one by one volley him between each other in a flurry of hits. If the Raider ends up getting ping-ponged early enough in the game, this can easily be a quarter to even a half of the Raider's health, depending on who they're playing as. And while it's frustrating for the survivors when the Raider can snipe them from nearly any distance, Raiders get to enjoy how the auto-lock-on screws with their ability to use projectiles even remotely effectively, assuming they're not using an attack that's been blessed with a Dark Souls hitbox. And if things are going poorly for the Raider, it's worse than a single bad Q. For those who haven't touched the game since launch, you no longer get to choose if you want to play Raider or Survivor. You're stuck as a Survivor by default, with a Raider priority determining which of the 8 survivors gets to be the Raider. So if your game ends quickly, but not too quickly, well, you wasted your one Raider game, and you will need to go through a minimum of 2 hours of Survivor matches just to have another attempt. For new players, it makes learning how to play Raider a painful process. Since there are no Survivor bots, the single-player training mode is damn near worthless for the Raider, and there are no Raider challenges to do. For veterans, it rewards them for just rage-quitting the game by Alt-F4ing and maintaining their Raider priority. And if they decide to do that quickly enough, it circles back around to the survivors not getting any rewards for the match. So, getting a game sucks, the actual gameplay isn't polished or refined, and it's consistently frustrating for both sides. So, what are you even fighting for? So here's the thing, Breakers does do one very nice thing with dailies and weeklies. These missions stack for the whole season, so if you miss a few days or even a few weeks, you can still catch up with them. DP medals are the only thing you truly miss out on a day-by-day basis. So, how can the game possibly mess this up? Well, you don't have them all available. If you have dailies or weeklies stacked up, there simply will be times where you meet the criteria for one, but because it wasn't active yet, it doesn't count. This is at its worst with Land 2 super attacks on the Raider missions, as you can get very unlucky with certain Survivor and Raider combos, or just get locked up against a sweaty Raider who's mastered the dodge. This is also where the ability to stack daily and weekly objectives actually becomes a bad thing. Once it's there, it's not going away until you get it done or the season is over, which feeds back into the issue of objectives only mattering when they're active. So any dailies or weeklies you can't get done is effectively a dead slot. There's also next to no mission variety, so if there's an objective you really don't like, it'll be back around pretty quickly. You can always adjust your loadout to make any given mission easier, but that's just the worst part of daily missions in any given live service, which, to be fair, isn't just a Breakers problem, but it results in you not playing the game the way you want or are comfortable with, but the way the game wants, so that way you can be rewarded for your efforts. And players start to prioritize their own private missions over actually winning, at least in a worst-case scenario. This can be especially bad in Breakers, where mission objectives can require certain outcomes you can't fully control, like contributing to the STM or defeating the Raider, 2 goals that often contradict each other. Most people would point to Marvel Rivals for the solution. Just let players re-roll a daily that they really don't like. But I think My Hero Ultra Rumble has a far better approach. In that game, you earn stars for completing your daily and weekly missions, with every 3 stars unlocking a bundle of Battle Pass progress. The nice part is not only are all the dailies and weeklies always available, but you actually get more of them than you need stars to get all the bundles. This means that if you don't like a certain one, you can still rather easily make maximum progress for each day or week. Plus, many of the gameplay objectives have hero and villain versions. If you prefer to stick to just 1 or 2 characters, you have plenty of options to get all of your XP for the day or week. If you struggle to find civilians or land killing blows, simply playing as heroes and villains regularly can make up for that. Combine that with season-long missions that unlock massive bundles of experience when done, and Royal Rumble does a much better job encouraging players to keep playing while accommodating many different playstyles. Getting back to Breakers, it could at least have a series of one-time challenges that gets expanded upon every season. Things like performing fake death on a Cyberman or Nappa, using Ginyu's body swap on a Goku transfer, defeating Broly with the Super Transfer, and preventing Majin Buu from being hatched. Stuff like that. But knowing Bandai Namco, I'd be willing to bet they've put a cap on how much players are allowed to earn for free. After all, they're the reason the gacha exists and why it's as awful as it is. Speaking of which, out of all of the predatory Shonen Jump games I've played, Dragon Ball The Breakers has the worst gacha. Which is impressive, given that, unlike Ultra Rumble, you can actually use the baby currency on the simple roulette wheels. However, the refund system is atrocious. The gacha pools come in 4 parts: which character you get, what version of it you get, what costume that version gets, and what skills come with it. If you get a duplicate, it's converted to a special currency. Here's the problem: that currency is not particularly helpful. The only thing you can get with that currency are super attacks for characters you've already gotten, and upgrade the skills you've already earned. You cannot unlock any skills or characters with it. Oh, and since the gacha pools come in bundles of 4, everything in every pool needs to be a copy. If there is a single unique thing for that character, it is not counted as a duplicate, even if it's something you don't need or don't want. Did you not get the one skill you were looking for? Well, that's too bad, Space Monkey. Back to the coal mines with you for another 150 games! Just to let you know, I played the game for about 3 seasons in total. I never finished my Videl. I never got the last few things I needed. By comparison, in Ultra Rumble, the duplicates can be used to get a voucher that unlocks any given character of your choice, including any alternate playstyles they introduce, and even if the character is new. What's not helping is how stingy Breakers has gotten with the Battle Pass rewards. You already never got any raiders for free in the game, but in the past 2 seasons, they've taken away the premium anime survivor skins that you used to get at level 50, and the premium currency you get out of the Dragon tier is pitiful. The 550 TP you get is only enough for a single premium survivor skin, and since they're released in doses of 2, that means you're gonna have to buy at least one of them. Events now give little to no TP as well, just recolors of existing outfits and more gacha roll tickets. 90% of the new content is added to the cash shop that requires real money, or the gacha, which gives you a less than 2% drop rate on a good day. You are grinding out this game with all of the problems I laid out in hopes of getting something to improve your survivor kit, as virtually anything that actually resembles a Dragon Ball game is now paywalled. Oh, and you need to unlock the skills to equip them on anyone besides their single designated character. And it's not cheap. While it's the one thing stopping the special currency from being literally useless, it can chew through those points very quickly. And because the game wants you to keep grinding, you need to get them to level 10 to unlock the skill, with each fee getting progressively more expensive. And then you need to get it to level 20 if you want those level ups to make a noticeable difference. It becomes extra aggravating when you realize some skills actually do just let you pay a single fee to unlock for customization. All the while, this system is the reason why your survivor skins, transfers, and skills are all locked to the same preset. They deliberately tied everything together to keep you grinding, while unintentionally ruining their presets. I would love to go on a tirade of how stupid this game handles its customization as a whole. The fact that you can only have one custom survivor saved at a time, the fact you only get 3 presets, meaning that your survivor skins and what they turn into have to share those 3 slots. So, for example, you can't have 3 versions of Launch and then 3 versions of Chi-Chi.
Is enough to get me to the boiling point!
Let's get back on track. Because, as a reminder, this isn't free to play. Breakers cost $20 with a $30 Not Broke edition. Despite this game having an admission fee, its monetization is up there with some of the worst free-to-play games out there. So you have to pay to access the bare minimum content, and then literally everything requires money. Anime skins and raiders cost as much as a fighting game character, despite having about as much gameplay impact as a DLC gun in Call of Duty. So, to summarize, Breakers is a game whose genre will always struggle to balance its gameplay additions. It has been deliberately updated to be a multiplayer game that hates the idea of friends from around the world playing together, has a gameplay loop with plenty of frustrations on all fronts. The only thing it has to offer every time you revisit is repetitive, unfulfilling, and irritating gameplay objectives, and all of its grind for increasingly lackluster rewards and currencies that no longer unlock anything they actually advertise in the trailers. And what hurts the most for me personally is that Breakers has an interesting premise. If they ever wanted to make a Xenoverse 3, Breaker's gimmick of having the non-combat characters transform into the main fighters of the series is pretty cool. Imagine GT Bulma talking with evil era Vegeta, Hercule talking with Majin Buu, or Frieza and Launch hurling insults at each other during a fight. Breakers could have even been a multiplayer mode attached to such a game, with DLC packs giving survivors, raiders, and story packs. Obviously, that's never going to happen, especially when Bandai Namco has gotten an audience that's used to overpaying for content updates for Xenoverse 2. But it really does drive home for me that Breakers feels like a multiplayer side mode, and realistically, it's never getting any better. And realistically, it's never getting any better.